I want to tell you about a church in Cincinnati. When I went to one of the cemeteries where my friend Marion is, where her ashes were interred, I was near a little church that I used to see years ago. I used to pass it in the daytime. It was a small little church. I don't remember what denomination. It was a kind of a cute size, but it looked kind of dark and dingy in the daytime. The windows, I thought, looked dirty and kind of dreary. And then one time I passed a little later in the life of the day, and they were having a service. The lights were on. And let me tell you how glorious those windows were. Jewel colors, and each window depicting one of those inspiring Bible stories that we've all heard and loved. I never thought of that church as dusty, dingy, overgrown with ivy again. I saw it with fresh eyes. Now, I know we've known some Bible passages, some Bible stories for a long time. And I think sometimes the repetition of them makes them pretty mechanical. And we're no longer really mindful of them. Sometimes we know the stories, but we really are not aware of that mystic meaning in back of the story. And sometimes it's happened maybe in your life, it's certainly happened in mine, when I was drawn to a particular Bible story or a psalm. Read it, and maybe afterwards, after putting down the text and doing something else, out of nowhere, it's as if dawn arrives. And all of a sudden, like that little church, I see the story, the psalm, with the light of day shining through those stained glass windows, and all of a sudden, I see the picture. I see the story. Understanding dawns, and I see what's in back of the story itself. Sometimes I'm still amazed at the truths that come out. I'm sure you are too. Sometimes it's just remarkable when we have those flashes of inspiration and insight. Now, I know the Psalms are filled with some really deep meaning that is sort of hidden behind the simple words, the simple text. And we may often use some of those words from the Psalms, such as the 23rd Psalm. I'm going to tell you that was the first Bible story, psalm, passage that I ever learned by memory. In the days when religion was still allowed in schools, when we were conforming to the words of the Constitution that the government shall not infringe upon the right to practice one's religion, as that's infringed upon these days, we had weekday Bible school. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Yeah. It was Tuesdays at my school. And if your parents approved, they had to sign an approval. But you got to go to the church across the street from the school for 1 hour on Tuesday. You were out of class. Those kids whose parents wouldn't have let them go had to sit in the classroom and do schoolwork. The rest of us got to go to, well, we called it E&R Church, Evangelical and Reformed Church. It was part of the Old Dutch Church. It later became a different name, but it was still connected to the Old Dutch Church, as Robert Schuller was, the old Protestant church in Holland. And I don't remember her name, but in my mind I see her face, the woman who taught our weekday Bible school class. I used to think she was a frog. Is that harsh of me? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Her tongue kept darting in and out, and I thought, frog. But that was the first thing I remember her teaching us. And we learned the entire 23rd Psalm by memory. I was 9 years old. It's never left me. What powerful words. We've used passages of Scripture for prayers. We've enjoyed them as poems. And yet, have we really seen some of the deep, hidden meaning that can be revealed when the light shines through, like those dark, dingy, stained glass windows? 23rd Psalm with that beautiful shepherd allegory. Do you love it? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Would you like to have a shepherd like that? It's a remarkable piece of writing. First, it takes you as the reader and the sheep through an entire year cycle as they move from one feeding area to another, as they are cared for and tenderly loved and ministered to by that beautiful, loving shepherd. It's wonderful to the imagination of a child, but gee. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. Doesn't something in your imagination turn on? If you don't see green pastures and still waters, do you not feel perhaps a relief, a release, a sense of peace? And of course, there's that tender, loving, watchful shepherd. The message in the whole psalm is about the calm, quiet trust that the sheep place in their beloved shepherd. Do you think you see a parallel? What about that calm, quiet trust that we need to place in our shepherd? Remember, Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. It's not Jesus out there on the fields. It's the Christ in you, in the fields of your life, guiding you, guarding you, protecting you, supplying you, ministering to you, as you remember that the shepherd is there. I'm not going to say that there are words in that psalm that are more important than others, because I think they're all important. But the first ones are the Lord is my what? Say it. The Lord is my shepherd. Imagine if you held on to that in the challenges and trials of life all the time. If you remembered that, instead of getting through all the panic and the fear and everything, oh my God, what's going to happen? And this is too big and I can't handle this. The Lord is my shepherd, your shepherd, always there. Every phrase from the Lord is my shepherd right on is like, do you know what a cameo is? I used to have a ring that was I have to say, was exquisite. It was an antique cameo. It was rectangular, and it had almost like a picture frame gold mounting around it. It was antique, and it came to me under very unusual circumstances. I went to an antique, an antique sale at a location in Cincinnati in the 60s. And one of the booths there was a man from somewhere in Kentucky. He dealt in antique jewelry. And a friend of mine, school teacher, Jane, she was looking at a beautiful, beautiful ring. It was one of those Australian fire opals. Oh, it was exquisite. She bought that from him, and I saw this cameo. Oh, it was about actually the size of that part of my finger. And of course, the cameo head was white in profile on a carnelian, a reddish brown background stone. It was marvelous. It was a beautiful piece of work. And in the 60s, it was $100 and some. I don't know, $135, $140. I probably had $2.50 in my pocket, $2.50. And the man watched me for a while as I admired the stone, and he came over to me. He said, I have to excuse myself. He said, would you watch my booth for a few minutes? I said, certainly. So he went off towards the facility. And I looked up after a moment, and I saw him over at the side of the room, just watching. And after a bit, he came back, and he said, thank you. He said, you like that ring? I said, yes. He said, would you like to purchase it? I said, I can't today. He said, tell you what, I'll give you my card, you take the ring, and you send me the money when you can. That almost makes me verklempt. You know what verklempt is? Yeah. And I said, okay. I greatly enjoyed that ring. And here are the connections. That beautiful cameo. About a year later, got mono in college. Remember, we were all getting mono and that mononucleosis. I was really sick. The ring would change color when I was ill, when I lacked energy. That red stone in the background would go blue-gray. It would, honest to God, change colors depending upon how I felt. Well, probably another year, and I heard about this woman at Unity in Cincinnati who did psychometry. You know what psychometry is? She was psychic, and she would hold things and close her eyes, and she'd get images. I had never met her, but a friend of mine named John was going to go to the Unity Church this particular week, and afterwards they all went to a Big Boy afterwards and had coffee or sandwiches or whatever. I said, would you take my ring? And he did. And she sat in that restaurant with my ring and did a reading. And then, strangest thing happened. John said he absolutely became terrified because he couldn't find the ring when it was time to leave. Oh, they hunted all over and under and around the table, and they finally found it wadded up in a napkin. I got my ring back. That woman was my friend Marion, who got me into Unity, whose gravesite I just saw a little over a week ago. One of the most important people in my life. From the meeting of the guy, getting the ring, it changing color and me realizing it was like a mood ring, and then it leading me to meet this woman, and the woman changing my life, and then the back of the ring was a closed-in back, and it was wearing through. And I had a friend who said, I'm dating a jeweler. You want me to have that fixed? I said, sure. Well, time passed and time passed. And next time I saw the person, I said, you still have my ring? She said, oh, no, I don't have your ring. So it moved on from my life, who knows where. But I think it did what it needed to do, right? The whole point here, beautiful cameos. Think of each of those phrases of the 23rd Psalm like a cameo strung on a wire of faith. Beautiful images to hold in your mind. Beautiful symbols to keep in your heart. I still have a childlike enthusiasm for those still waters, for those green pastures, and for the grazing flocks that I see in my head. What about you? But remember, where do you begin? The Lord is my shepherd. That idea, that abiding presence. When you look at the 23rd Psalm, it's like that dingy little church of mine. When you see it a little later in the day of your life, or in the life of your day, and the light comes on, you see something that was hidden. And you see it from that illumination from within. Now, the words of this 23rd Psalm, they've provided comfort and light to millions over the years. They've provided that for me as I've walked my own special path of wonder, as I sometimes call it. And, the plan of life seems to include some challenges. Have you noticed that? Took me a while to realize. A chicken or a duck, they have to struggle to get out of that shell, don't they? And if you break it open for them, they don't thrive. They need the exertion in order to get everything working so that they can grow and unfold. Plant a seed, put it in the ground, and the hull on that seed has to split. It has to open up in order for that growth to take place. Well, the same thing happens in our lives. Things come to us. Jesus said, in this world ye have tribulation, right? But be of good cheer. I am overcome the world. The Christ in you overcomes any outer situation. The plan of life seems to include opportunities for growth, opportunities that sometimes are difficult, sometimes are downright painful. Birth. Can you imagine what it must be like for the baby? Difficult, probably painful, but necessary in order to move into the next stage of life. Oh, I know we want to avoid the challenges. We want to avoid difficulties. We want to avoid pain as much as possible. If the chickens avoided it getting out of the shell, there'd be no KFC. You'd be eating something else. We need those words, the Lord is my shepherd. And it's to that shepherd that we need to turn during those challenges, during those opportunities for growth, during those times where life is a little bit painful. And then you get an inner refreshment that restores your soul, that allows you to take another step, to go a little further, to grow a little more, to come across greater understanding. Jesus sought this restoration. He looked among the green hills and beside the still waters in his beloved Galilee, didn't he? Go find a quiet, calm, wonderful place and renew himself by reconnecting with the Lord of his being. And then he issued an invitation to all of us. And he said, to all who are weary and heavy laden. Do you ever feel weary and heavy laden? Well, I do sometimes. And it's Matthew 11, verses 28, 29. He said, come unto me, all ye who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That's the divine Christ in you. Look unto me. I am the Lord of your being. I will restore your soul. Jesus went on and said, take my yoke upon you and learn of me. Oh, to take my yoke is to join in partnership with that divine inner spirit, to allow you and your God spirit, your Christ spirit, to work together, to allow it to work through you. You become one spiritual unit. For I am meek and lowly in heart. I do not force you, the Christ says, to acknowledge me, to allow me to work through you. But I am here. I am not ego. I am divine. And I am here for you. And what happens when you allow that partnership to take place? The last line Jesus said from verse 29, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. Rest. Well, that's half of restore, isn't it? The better half of restore. Jesus knew the secret of making contact with the universal sources of all life and vitality. He knew that the infinite source of recreation is always available to us. It never can be separated from us. And we can be born again. Do you like that phrase? Born again. Renewing, restoring, refreshing that soul that is within you. So you once again see clearly. Once again, you are changed. And in Bible language it says, in the twinkling of an eye. Wow, that's pretty fast, isn't it? It sounds pretty effortless too, doesn't it? All you have to do is acknowledge what? The Lord is my shepherd. And feel that connection. Old things can become new to you. Old things pass away. The shadows of the past can be made to disappear in the sunlight. And you can read that any way you like. S-U-N-S-O-N. The light of the sun within. Have you ever had these challenges, these opportunities for growth, and then just brooded over them? Oh, I can remember back in ministerial school, Martha Judici was on my case. Martha Judici apparently loved me. It's not personally, but she wanted to be my mentor. She wanted to take me under her wing. Now, she didn't ask. She just wanted to do that. So she decided I should come to her office once a month for personal counseling, something I did not want. And I remember every month, I lived across the street from the reservations office, and every month before I had to go into her office, I'd go over and visit with my friends in reservations, and I'd just sit there and, you know the word brood? Sit on this and think on it, and think on it with resentment and anger. And eventually, I got through it all. I think the longer I brooded on it, the longer I had to do it. She didn't think I was in touch with my feelings. So it was the day I showed her my anger, she decided I was healed. And I didn't get loud or anything. I just spoke very quietly and very clipped, and she backed up in her chair. And later she said, I think we've done our work here. Took me a long time to realize she saw something and she wanted to nurture it. And she really did love me. And she was trying to do the best she could for me. At the time, I didn't understand and appreciate it, but afterwards, I certainly got to see. And Martha, wherever you are, thank you. We can brood over these misfortunes. We can brood over these challenges that we're facing, but if you think intelligently, if you think spiritually, you can forgive, you can forget, you can erase the darkness and emerge into the sunshine of your restored soul. That sounds like a beautiful place to be, doesn't it? And I'm going to venture to say you've had momentary experiences of this. Little restorations time to time in your life. The rod and the staff. Remember, what are the words? The rod and thy staff, what? They comfort me. I think sometimes the rod and the staff, we get bitter about it because we think it's punishment. What is presented for us when the rod and the staff represents our guidance and protection, encouragement to go on, to go ahead, to go forward, to be more than you have been. But we choose to consider the rod and the staff, so they become for us. And in the hands of the Supreme Shepherd, the Divine Shepherd, they're tools of gentle guidance which lead us beside still waters and make us to lie down in green pastures for the restoration of our souls. Adversities like lack and loss, disappointment, or failure, they come to all of us, don't they? If you've not had any, please raise your hand. Whew. I didn't want to be the only one in the room that had those kind of things. They come to all of us. But they're never imposed by God to try our faith or to punish us for wrongdoing, as I think some of us have been taught. I was taught that, and it's not true. They are merely the results of our own untrue thinking, error thinking. Now, you've driven through mountainous country. You've driven some mountainous roads in your time, I certainly hope. I've driven some of those where I thought I was going to get seasick from the curves and all that. Those roads are not always smooth. They're not straight, and they're not always sunny. Sometimes they plunge into dark canyons where rocky precipices seem inaccessible, where it looks dangerous and hard. But there's always a way through. Some of us choose other trails, longer, steeper, harder paths. I've certainly done that in my life. But we do at a greater cost. But even though we walk a different path than the easy one, the destination is the same. The cost is just higher sometimes. More effort, takes longer. The easiest way is to surrender and say, okay, Lord, we walk through this together. Even though we walk through the valley of the shadow, or we stumble up a rocky trail without really knowing the end destination, we don't have to fear evil, for the shepherd we can call upon. The shepherd is there, and we can trust in his ever and eternal care. Now, we're going to be supplied each step of the way in the presence of our enemies of lack and limitation. We're going to be supplied. Our heads will be anointed with the oil of gladness, and our cup of blessings, it will overflow. When God said that there's abundance here for all of his creatures, it's abundance without limitation. There's no withholding of good. And even God's abundance is apt to reach even beyond your capacity to receive. That's a wonderful place to be, isn't it? Think about that. The windows of heaven are open and the good pouring out, overflowing into your life, that you have not vessels to hold it all. It sometimes runs over our capacity to receive. And yet even we are promised that it will do so unfailingly all the days of our lives. The soul that is restored shall fear no evil, wherever its owner may take it, wherever it may go. For it will always be in the house of the Lord forever. Like sheep, have you ever gone astray? Where's the stray? I'll find it, and I'll go there. Yeah. Sometimes we turn to our own devices, and then we wonder why the light of God, the radiance, grows dim. Why faith seems to only come in moments, and challenges in days, and doubts, they seem habitual. It's because we let the inner ear dwell upon and listen on stuff outside, on stuff that's not true. But when you find your center in God, when you find your center with that good and faithful shepherd, you have a place of refuge where you can enter, close the door, and keep out all the confusion and dwell in the presence of the restorer of souls. Where do you begin? That connection to the source. And after that, remember everything it will do through you if you remember.